I'm at Cabo in Goa, right up on the sea, and with me is the all-new Vitara Brezza. Now, not only does it get an all-new face and a different design up front, it also gets this, the K series, a 105 horsepower petrol engine. Out goes the diesel, in comes the petrol. How good is it? Does that extra power make a difference? Does it drive differently? I'm going to get right into the driver's seat. But wait, first up, how do you tell this new Brezza petrol from the diesel? Where is it different? Well, let's start with the nose, where the headlight unit gets a chrome bracket for the individual lighting elements, upturned LED horns, and Maruti designers have used a thick chrome bar on the grille that connects the two headlights. The fog-like enclosures are much larger and look like mini inlets, and there's a tougher looking new bull bar. Must say, I think it works well. Not much has changed at the rear, but the new LED surrounds on the taillights work well too. Now let's get going. Well, first up, what's clear is that the ride is more comfortable. Now right away on these broken roads and over these bumps, you can easily tell that ride is much improved. It's much softer, it's more supple. There's no hard edge like there was earlier, and even when you go over some seriously big stuff like these bumps, it doesn't even thud through. So a lot of comfort and a much more supple ride. What also sets the Brezza apart is the robust build. And that's the other thing about this car. It's always had a tough suspension. It's always been pretty robust. And it feels like you can chuck this car into just about any ditch or hole and not have to worry about it. And that's fabulous. Also different on this Brezza is the steering setup. It's much lighter, it's much easier to twirl, there's less weight, and that makes it more practical for everyday use. The downside of that, however, is that it isn't very nice in corners. It's quite vague, there isn't too much feel, and probably because the heavy weight of the diesel has come off the front wheels, there's much less road feel. The petrol engine, however, is quite refined. Now, because this is a naturally aspirated engine, the bottom end is nice and smooth, progression is good, and it does pull pretty cleanly. What you do miss, however, is that spike of power around 2,000 or 3,000 RPM. This engine just feels flat and doesn't have the mid-range punch you expect from a diesel or a turbo petrol. Spin the engine faster and things, however, improve. Now get past around 3,000 RPM and this naturally aspirated engine comes into its own. It pulls all the way to around 6,000 cleanly and then shift up and it carries on. And then performance is pretty strong. It's reasonably quick, 0 to 100 coming up in 11.8 seconds, and that even compares well with the Venue turbo petrol. And what's also nice is this clutch and gearbox combo. It's nice and light, the clutch, it engages easily and doesn't pop, and the gearbox is absolutely beautiful, light, direct, and an absolute joy to use. It almost makes you want to forget the automatic. The automatic, that's next. Now the Brezza also gets an automatic, not the same AMT as the earlier diesel Brezza. This one is a 4-speed torque converter equipped auto, the same as on the Ertiga with the 1.5. This engine, this one is also nice and smooth, easy to drive, and has a nice strong bottom end. That torque converter gives this engine a nice torque fill at the bottom and gives it some muscle, and that means you can take off smartly from rest and you have a reasonable amount of power when you need to get back on the throttle. Get to an open road, however, and because it has only 4 speeds, there is a bit of stretch and strain and the gap between the ratios is so large that you feel you've sometimes fallen out of the power band. Acceleration isn't as strong as the manual. It takes 13.4 seconds from 0 to 100. No real changes on the inside, however. Yes, you do get this new Smart Play here, the new interface from Maruti, and you also get a small number of differences because it's the automatic and it's a mild hybrid. Little things like this tiny display here where it shows the engine, the electric motor and the battery to tell you about how the hybrid system is functioning, and there's a start-stop button here on the left, as well as these automatically folding mirrors. But apart from that, the interiors are just the same, a bit too plasticky and grey. The rear seat, however, is still a nice place to be. Now, one big strength the Brezza has is that it's nice and wide and comfortable in the back. Bit of theatre seating here, you sit at a good height above the front seats so you can look out. There's enough headroom and shoulder room. The seat is pretty good also and a decent amount of legroom. There's no vent here for the back seat passengers and no charging points. But if you want to be chauffeur driven, this probably is one of the best cars in its class to do it in. The Brezza Petrol isn't the best equipped SUV in its class. Still, top ZXi and ZXi Plus versions get kit like auto headlights, rain sensing wipers, LED headlights, etc. Stuff missing includes wireless charging, electronic stability control, sunroof, and it's not a connected car, even today in 2020. Cosmetic changes on the outside have no doubt refreshed the Brezza, which now looks distinctive and different from the earlier one. The talking point, of course, is the switch to petrol, the biggest benefit of which is smooth running and refinement. But that's what you expect. Performance with 105 horsepower on tap is also marginally stronger, especially at high engine speeds. But what you do miss a lot is that mid-range punch that both a turbo diesel and even a turbo petrol would deliver. In truth, though the engine is the largest in its class, performance isn't exactly scintillating. On the flip side, the disadvantage of all that extra engine displacement is that the Brezza loses its small car tax benefit, which is why with prices ranging from 7.4 lakhs to 11.4 lakhs, it isn't as competitively priced as its rivals. And that apart, it isn't as well equipped either. Even the cabin is barely changed. Still, Maruti has played to the Brezza's strengths of practicality, ease of use and overall dependability. And that's what Maruti will be banking on to keep its share of SUV buyers.
We've got the new GLC coupe with us, and as you can see, it's got the facelift. But the big talking point here is, apart from the facelift, the coupe is now available in a non-AMG guise. You see, the earlier car was brought to India as a completely built-up unit, imported here, and only as an AMG. This car now has a petrol and a diesel, so you have a regular engine options too. In fact, the AMG version will follow. So what's it like? Well, let's go and have a look.
The facelift is very minor, and just like the regular GLC that was facelifted about 2 months ago, at the front the coupe gets the newly designed headlights and the bumper too. The grille though is the diamond pinhead type with a single horizontal bar, whereas the regular car gets a twin bar setup. At the side you'll notice the new alloys, and compared with the earlier AMG coupe, the glass area is now chrome lined. At the rear, there are newly designed tail lights with the lighting element design now resembling the pattern seen on other Mercedes SUVs.
Now, apart from the BS6 engines, of course, the big update really, and something that consumers would really like, is the new interior, or rather I would say the updated interior, because a lot of it is quite familiar, but it now gets the Mercedes MBUX connectivity system. One way to identify that is you've got a larger screen and it's now a touch screen. In fact, there are a lot of touch surfaces inside, where the earlier car had a tiny little screen and the older command unit. This one now has a touch screen here. You've got a touchpad down here, and you have two touch pads on the steering wheel as well. So a lot of touch interfaces as well. Of course, I do miss the click wheel, which made it quite easy to use while driving. But apart from that, this whole interior is definitely a welcome change and a step above what the previous version had. The dials here too are well screens, simulated dials. So you can have different displays thrown up, especially according to your driving modes. And of course, you also have... Hey Mercedes.
How may I help you?
I'm feeling hungry.
Please select an entry.
Set the temperature to 24 degrees.
I'm setting the temperature on the driver's side to 24 degrees.
Change the ambient light to red.
The system understands a few natural language phrases, so you don't have to remember a set phrase. Along with this, the MBUX system also has an app that works with an eSIM on board to give you the connected car experience. In terms of other connectivity bits, the system now has Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, along with a built-in navigation system. And a small but welcome addition is wireless charging. Something that isn't great though is the reliance on only Type-C USB ports.
Now, as you'd expect, headroom can be tight in a coupe, but what Mercedes have done is they've scooped away some of the headlining over here, and that's liberated a few inches of headroom. So for my 5'8" frame, well, it isn't too much of a problem. You do feel a bit hemmed in though. The windows are a little small, but then again, if you were to buy this, I suspect you'd be sitting up there in the front and enjoying the drive. So why don't we do that, and let's head out.
We had with us the diesel car, which gets the newer OM654 2-litre engine. It's the same as in the regular GLC, but here in its 300D guise, it puts out more power, making 245 horsepower and 500 Newton meters of torque. Just like in the regular car though, the level of refinement is very impressive.
Cruising along, you'll really enjoy the engine's silence because it's really quiet, very hushed. You don't even realize it's a diesel at speed, and even when you rev it really hard, the sound note doesn't get too harsh. Now it also has drive modes, so you do have Eco, Comfort and Sport, Sport Plus, etc. But what it does do is, while it influences the engine and the gearbox and the steering, it doesn't do anything to the dampers or the suspension. And honestly, that's something I would have preferred if it had control over the dampers, because while the ride is really nice, in corners like this, it feels a little too soft, and there is some amount of roll and float as well. You know, this is the coupe after all, and you'd want a little bit of a sporty touch to it.
In terms of power delivery, it's linear and strong all the way to about 4,500 RPM, where no matter what drive mode you're in, or even if you're in manual mode, the auto box will upshift.
Now acceleration is pretty brisk. Put your foot down like this and it'll drop a gear or two and just shoot off. It isn't AMG quick, but respectable enough.
Mercedes claim a 0 to 100 km/h time of 6.6 seconds, which makes it about 1.3 seconds quicker than the regular GLC. And you will notice that from behind the wheel. So it's quicker than the regular car, but should you buy one? It depends on how you look at it. In one way, it falls in no man's land. Neither as spacious or practical as the regular car, nor is it as sporty and fun as the AMG. But on the other hand, you now don't have to go the whole hog into AMG territory and stretch your wallet too. Priced at 63.7 lakh, about 6 lakh over the regular car, you can enjoy the sportier performance of the coupe, along with some added equipment like a driver's memory seat and a full digital instrument panel. So if you like the appeal of an SUV coupe, you now have more choice with 2 regular trims. Oh, and of course, the AMG is all set to follow too.
This is the BMW X1 facelift, and it's got some subtle styling changes that bring it closer in line to its bigger siblings, the X5, the X6 and the X7. There are some updates on the inside too, but more importantly, there's BMW's 2-litre 4-cylinder diesel engine now in BS6, guys. Well, I'm going to drive it today to tell you what's new and what that new engine is like from behind the wheel. And now, those all too subtle styling changes. At the front, you'll notice the bumper is new and far more aggressive in its design, the round fog lamps being replaced by slimmer light bands. Then there are the headlamps, whose internals now remind you of the X5s. But the biggest change is the grille, which is now a single-piece unit and significantly larger and more angular, much like the one on the new X6. At the back, you'll find a lightly reworked bumper as well as revised LED tail lamps, but that's about it. If anything, the changes inside are even subtler. It feels a little richer thanks to embellishments like the double stitching on the dash, but overall quality is still a little lower compared to newer generation cars. There's a new gear lever that looks far more modern, there's now multicolor ambient lighting for the interior, and that's about it. There's also a newer version of BMW's iDrive infotainment system, but it's not the absolute latest one. And though this is an 8.8-inch touchscreen, its widescreen format makes it look a bit small. That said, the system packs in a lot of features, and overall the X1 is very well equipped. Though it has to be said, not as well equipped as the Volvo XC40. Moreover, owners will appreciate the class-leading rear seat space that's only accentuated by the huge panoramic sunroof. A tiny change in here is that you now get USB Type-C charging ports instead of a 12-volt socket for your devices. Also class-leading is the boot volume at 500 litres. But on to the big news, and that is BMW's revised 2-litre diesel engine. They've achieved BS6 compliance by using a combination of a diesel particulate filter or DPF and a selective catalytic reduction unit or SCR, and so next to the fuel filler cap you'll find an AdBlue filling port. But a move to BS6 tends to affect an engine's driving characteristics, so let's check that out in the real world. Now this is our first time experiencing the BS6 version of BMW's venerable 2-litre 4-cylinder diesel engine. And while the numbers of 190 horsepower and 400 Newton meters remain the same, the feel of this engine is just a little bit different. For a start, it's noticeably more refined, it's quieter at idle and when you rev it out, and then there's the power delivery. Power flows in a lot more smoothly this time around, and that characteristic punch that you used to get in the mid-range from BMW diesel engines has been dulled down significantly. Now, enthusiastic drivers might miss that about this engine, but fret not, because this is still a very strong motor. For instance, against our testing equipment, this BS6 X1 did 0 to 100 kph in 7.7 seconds, which is marginally quicker than the BS4 car, and the difference is even more in kickdown acceleration. And it must be noted, the BS4 car we tested had all-wheel drive. But the performance also has a little something to do with which mode you have the car set to. From coasting gently, all you have to do is flatten your foot, there's a slight hesitation from the gearbox, but then you are soaring ahead. And that is when you have the car in comfort mode. When you switch it to sport, responses are just electric. Now again, in the old car, switching from comfort to sport mode was like switching from day to night, but here the difference is a little bit more subtle. But it is definitely a difference, and you do feel a lot more responsiveness from this powertrain in sport mode for the engine and the gearbox. And speaking of the gearbox, this 8-speed torque converter automatic is really good. At low speeds it shuffles along nicely, and when you want to go faster it doesn't really get in your way, it just gets along with it really smoothly and really quickly in the background. And well, apart from that, the BMW X1 is the excellent dynamic package you all remember so well. In fact, the suspension has been revised considerably, and the result is a slightly more compliant ride. Ride comfort is just superb with incredible bump absorption. especially on these 17-inch wheels. If you opt for the M Sport pack, you will get 18-inch wheels, and I suspect that will add a bit of a firm edge to the ride. Now, of course, there will be some that will lament the fact that this is a front-wheel drive BMW, but the simple fact is it absolutely wipes the floor with everything else in this segment when it comes to handling. And when I said front-wheel drive, I really meant it, because this car is no longer offered with all-wheel drive. All the variants in the range at present are currently front-wheel drive only. The steering too is just wonderful. It's got that great BMW sharpness, but it's also light enough at low speeds and gives you enough confidence at high speeds. Just about everything you want, really. On to the prices. This S-Drive 20D X-Line variant costs a competitive 39.9 lakh rupees. And the range on the whole starts lower thanks to a new base model called the Sport X that costs 35.9 lakh rupees. It goes up to 42.9 lakh rupees for the diesel M Sport version, and that means despite all the updates, the whole range is, spec for spec, just 40 to 60,000 rupees more expensive than before. So the facelift has brought some crucial improvements to the X1, not least of all that engine. But what it remains is an excellent package that's spacious, comfortable, practical and great to drive. Now in terms of competition, the XC40 has switched to petrol only, and the GLA and the Q3 are due for all new versions in a little while. So for the moment, this diesel X1, well, it has the market all to itself.
And now it's time for tips on sustainability and protecting the environment with Servo Futura G Plus from Indian Oil. Choose a smaller car if you don't need the size and space. Overloading the car with weight makes it work harder.